I visited the project last summer, shortly after they'd acquired this Madsen mine out of bankruptcy. And I was really taken by the opportunity that they had identified and acted on. I will admit that when they first told me the story, like first blush, okay, this group is going to come in and they're experienced operators and they're going to do the thing that the other company screwed up. It seemed too good to be true, right? But then I'm walking around this project and this mill is beautiful. And I know that there's 2 million ounces of gold. I'm looking at it in the wall of the underground. This is Red Lake, Ontario, where, the geology is really prolific. And then the team was the thing that made it possible.
The Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.
And welcome. This is Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. We are coming to you with a sponsor update from West Red Lake Gold Mines. And I had the pleasure of interviewing the CEO, now good friend, Gwen Preston. You know her, I know you know her as the resource maven, is now head of investor relations at West Red Lake. And Gwen, it's great to have you on the show. It's great to get a sponsor update from you. So the first thing everyone wants to know here, and I'm sure you get this question from your subscribers, everyone else, is why?
Absolutely. It's the question of the moment. And it's a valid question. I spent 10 years writing Resource Maven, which was that subscriber-supported newsletter. And it was amazing. I mean, I loved helping engaged mining investors find good opportunities, understand the mining capital markets and the pressures and the opportunities in that, the risks, helping people understand geology and make money. We had some great wins. It was a heck of a ride. I really enjoyed Resource Maven, but I did do it for 10 years, which is a nice stint. And I got to know the team here at West Red Lake as an investor. I covered it in my newsletter. I visited the project last summer, shortly after they'd acquired this Madsen mine out of bankruptcy. And I was really taken by the opportunity that they had identified and acted on. I will admit that when they first told me the story, like first blush, okay, this group is going to come in and they're experienced operators and they're going to do the thing that the other company screwed up. It seemed too good to be true, right? But when I did that trip last July to the Madsen mine, the reason that I love site visits so much is that you get to talk to everybody on site, right? Like from the person sweeping the floor in the mill through to anybody who works, whatever, in food services or, through the chief geologist and the mining engineers and everybody in between. You get to talk to them all. And all the people on site were mostly people who worked through those pure gold days because they're the Red Lake locals who want to work at a mine. And every single one of them reiterated the story that West Red Lake had approached me with, which is that, Pure Gold was really driven to build this mine on the tightest budget possible to keep themselves attractive to potential acquirers. And that when you have not enough money and a lack of operator and mine building expertise in management, you put those things together and bad decisions are made. And so each person that I spoke with, like I say, from the all of the various employees at the mill all the way through the operation, they just reflected to me their own versions of that experience, right? All of the things that they'd had to try and manage because the decisions were wrong and the leadership wasn't there. But then I'm walking around this project and this mill is beautiful. And I know that there's 2 million ounces of gold. I'm looking at it in the walls of the underground. This is Red Lake, Ontario, where, the geology is really prolific. And then the team was the thing that made it possible, right? So bring on Shane Williams, who He is just such an experienced mine builder and mine operator, has done so for major companies for many years. And then when you have a really good leader, you can attract a fantastic team. And that's exactly what he pulled to him, from like the VP of Technical Services and Maurice Mostard through to the Geology VP and Will Robinson and, to the CFO and the whole team. They provide exactly the mine building and operating expertise that was lacking the previous time. So I loved the story as an investor. And then when they started talking to me about whether I might want to come and work for them, they had been that brings us to now. So now they've been on the ground for 10 months, identifying all those mistakes that were made. What did those bad decisions, how did they manifest? Identify them, see what the fixes could or should be. And now we're at this, what I think is just a really exciting tipping point where we're going from figuring out what needs to be fixed. Now we are implementing those fixes. And, now we're on that golden runway where the team here is driving to get this thing into production by the middle of next year. And that, when you look at share price patterns in junior mining, most of them are full of risk and not very reliable. But the one that is the most reliable of them all is that golden runway, right? Where you go from spending money to explore, to do studies, to build. When you go from spending money to making money, because you're producing, that share price re-rate is the most reliable pattern in mining. And that's the accelerated pathway that this company is on. So I get to join at a very exciting time.
Okay, so what impressed me about Shane is, it's just like doctors. When the doctor messes something up and then you go to another doctor, they don't usually want any part of it. And you got to search for the one guy that specializes in fixing other people's messes. And Shane struck me as that person. These guys, literally took the golden opportunity and flushed it. And now Shane comes in and he's looking at it with new eyes and like you said, figuring out where did they go wrong and how do we avoid that fate?
Yeah, and he's a real leader, and it takes a lot of, it's a challenging story to communicate too, right? Because of course, Pure Gold it made a bunch of money for people, and then it erased all of that money for a lot of people, which is a terrible story. And so it's also a hard story to communicate, where you have to convince people that the mistakes that were made are fixable mistakes. It's not that the gold wasn't actually there. It's not that the gold cannot be taken out of the rocks. Those things, which are complete showstoppers for a mine, those things are not the problem. The problems are more specific and fixable. We can certainly go through that list if you want, but it's so to communicate that, and then to just have the focus and drive and team management to be able to, step by step, go through all of those, identify those things and fix them all. For sure, it's a big challenge, and it takes a special person to do that.
Right. And just on the heels of a major financing, 33 million raised. So hopefully capital is not going to be an issue like it was with the predecessor. Just tell us, what are the top 3 challenges that are facing the team?
So the key drive in our team right now is internally to solidify what our mine restart plan is. And so we know exactly what, when, how needs to happen for the restart for us to absolutely be able to turn this mine on by the middle of 2025. So we're very close to that. Then we need to transition that into a pre-feasibility study that we can publish, put out there, and then we'll be able to actually start talking about costs and scales and things like that, right? Because you need to have a report before you can talk those numbers. So getting to those really important moments is the drive. But underneath all of that, we don't want to publish a pre-feasibility study in November that outlines a list of tasks that still need to be accomplished that take a bunch of time and money. Our goal is to publish that pre-feasibility study and for the market to realize that the majority of the work that's needed for this restart is already underway or even finished. And so while we're advancing these planning studies, we've already, because of the work that the team did in the last 10 months, we've identified those critical path items, right? We've identified the things that need to happen on site so that when we get to that pre-feasibility study, when we get a little bit beyond that to the decision to restart, it's honestly a restart decision. It's like, okay, let's turn it on. We're not looking at the need to spend another however many tens of millions and or spend however many months doing such and such. Those jobs are already done. So it's the biggest challenge right now is the juggling of accomplishing those critical path items while also solidifying the sort of formal line plan and then being able to talk about those things in the orders that we can.
So Shane, when I spoke with him last time, he alluded that there was a lot of gold like left over in the mill that never got processed. I mean,
this is such an interesting story, hey? So the lack of mine building and operating expertise, and the drive to sell the asset that were hallmarks of the Pure Gold story. One of the things that created was a lack of sort of culture, of workplace culture, positive workplace culture. So the Madsen mine went through like 6 general managers in a 3-year period, or I don't know. It was about that. So there was an incredibly high turnover of even top level staff. And a machine, especially a complicated machine like a mill, is only as good as the people who run it. And so and then you layered COVID on top of it. They were also trying to build this thing during COVID when it was really hard to get particular supplies and whatnot. And so there were just mistakes made, a few mistakes made in the mill itself, like the liners for the mill. So the mill spins things around and smashes balls of steel against the rock to break them up, right? And you always put a liner on the inside of that mill because otherwise you'd be smashing the rock and steel into the mill itself, and then you'd have to rebuild the whole thing regularly. Instead, you take liners out and replace them, and that's how you manage that damage. Well, they used the wrong liners, and because the liners didn't fit together properly, well, a whole bunch of mineralized material got stuck in nooks and crannies. The filters, lots of various processes in the milling system, things get filtered. If you don't have the right filters, if you don't clean the filters appropriately or on the right time frames, they clog up with, as it turns out, gold. There's lots of places like this in a complicated machine where the gold can honestly just fall through the cracks if it's not built exactly right and or it doesn't have a really experienced operator watching for those things and making sure that they don't crop up as a problem. But they were a problem for Pure Gold, and there was a lot of mineralized material that was left on the floor, jammed into nooks and crannies, and so we hired an expert in mill cleanup. And, in his first pass, he just did one small component of the mill and came up with over 400 ounces of gold. And then Shane was like, okay, you got to clean up this whole mill. And now there's honestly buckets sitting on the floor. There was a picture of it in our news release, but those big 10-gallon buckets full of stuff that's been scraped and scoured out of the mill. And you look in the buckets and it looks like sand mixed with gold, because that's what it is. So we're going to pour some gold from that soon. We should be able to get a full number for that in the next little while. But it's going to be exciting. It's going to be thousands of ounces of gold that we just scrape out of the mill.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
And they were that close, they were that close, and they just couldn't get over the finish line. And so you got money, you got the right people. Now it's just going through the process, checking the boxes, getting the checklist set up, and then you move ahead. And that's less than a year away, mid 2025, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, getting to production is so important. And it's important because that's the first goal. Let's get to production. Let's start making money. Let's demonstrate that this opportunity that we saw is valid, is real, is everything that we said it was going to be. But also getting this thing into production, once you have a producing underground gold mine in an area like Red Lake, Ontario, then you have the ability to really look around underground. It's very expensive to look around underground if you're not operating a mine, because you have to be down there, you have to be maintaining all of the underground infrastructure. You can't look deep from surface because those holes are too long and slow and expensive. But once you have an operating mine that's making money, and you're underground, you have the ability to look around, and regions like Red Lake reward that when you look around underground. So there's lots of scattered drill hits from times past that suggest very good potential for us to find more gold at depth at the Madsen mine. But really the way to do that is to be underground and look around from underground. We're doing some of that work now, absolutely. And we will do more of it as the year goes on. But once this thing is operating, the exploration team is just going to be able to go for it and really start looking around to see if this thing can become bigger than, tapping the 2 million ounces that we know are there.
Shane indicated he's pretty upbeat and optimistic about exploration and upside potential here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Shane can certainly go off on that in an entire interview. Will, the VP of Exploration, the two of them together in a room, it's hard to stop them talking. I mean, it's things like the 8 zone, right? The 8 zone is at the bottom of the shaft. The shaft was built back in the first version of the Madsen mine, which was from the mid-30s to the 70s. And they drove a almost 1,300 meter shaft down to get to this 8 zone, because the ore that's down, the mineralized material that's down there, the resource today grades 14 grams per ton gold, right? This is like 14 to 18 grams per ton gold. Whereas the majority of the resource that we've defined in the rest of the Madsen mine grades a little bit less than 8 grams per ton. It's way higher grade down there, and that is a tantalizing prospect. There's lots of other reasons geologically that's interesting. It's in a slightly different rock type. The Red Lake mine just down the road that made Goldcorp into the company that it is, it was able to increase in size tenfold from a 50,000 ounce per year producer to a 500,000 ounce per year producer when they discovered the high grade zone that, guess what, was at about 1,300 meters and was much higher grade than the rest of the mineralized material at the Red Lake mine and was in a slightly different rock type. So, right, there's all of these things that are very tantalizing, and we really want to be able to pursue those potentials.
Just the fact that you're going to be producing in around a year is, that sets you apart from virtually all of your peers. It's such a rarity nowadays, and hey, exciting times. I know that Shane told me it's the most exciting opportunity of his life, of his career, and it's great that the team is in there that's able to actually take advantage and fully realize the potential. So, hey, maybe you'll be here for the next 10 years, Gwen, telling the story, right?
I hope so. I absolutely hope so, because I think there's a lot of potential here in this team, in this asset, and in whatever else, comes our way.
Which, once you're producing, the world is your oyster, and absolutely. Opportunities just pour in through the door. That's for sure. So
that's right. Yes.
Hey, well, appreciate your coming on and giving us the sponsor update and your story too. It's so interesting. You never know where life is going to take you, but you should go over to westredlakegold.com, sign up for notifications. You'll find out when all these milestones, these catalysts are achieved. The ticker symbols in the U.S., WLRGF, and of course in Canada, WRLG. Gwen, we'll be talking to you again. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
The Financial Survival Network.